Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the church that meets at Withamsville. All you YouTubers out there and Facebook Live watchers, we're glad to have you this morning as we continue on our journey talking about the parenting trap. Barry Bovary and I have been teaching so far this semester. Last week we obviously had a couple technical difficulties that created some adventure for us at the last minute, but we're very glad to have had the opportunity to get Kevin on the air last week. And Barry and I will be adjusting our schedules for the coming weeks. Hope everyone's doing well. We have been talking for the last couple of weeks around some different techniques, some different thoughts on parenting, specifically around how we think about ourselves as parents and leveraging a couple of the tools and books that we've had. So I hope everyone's been doing well out there in quarantine land. It's really interesting, the reality that is the new norm today. It's quite funny that we talked quite a bit actually before the quarantine around this idea of FaceTime, of screen time, and spending time with your family, that a lot of times we have had experiences where we're sitting in the same room together using technology totally disconnected from each other. And now during quarantine, we tend to see more communication in person, people out and about in the neighborhoods, walking, in parks, maintaining social distancing, but more face-to-face communication. It's quite common in our neighborhood to see neighbors standing, one at the end of the driveway and one maybe halfway up or in the middle of the yard, having conversations, catching up, not using technology to do that. It's quite interesting to see the development and changes that has happened. And it's kind of this concept of reverse psychology. Before the COVID quarantine, we had a lot of challenges getting our children to go outside in general or things of that nature. And now, it's quite interesting to see the desire to get out, to want to just be somewhere besides in the house, doing things that they get kind of restricted on. Spending a lot of time during school time on technology and screen time there. It's almost a little bit of this balance shift, which is kind of interesting. So as we think about that, it's kind of interesting for us as parents to try and leverage that in positive ways. It's interesting for us as Christians, as an opportunity to share more with our neighbors and spend time really spreading God's word. So picking up again where we have been talking about, Barry and I for the last couple of weeks have been talking about this book that we've been referencing, Scream-Free Parenting. And it's really focusing on raising our kids to be adults, but by learning to focus on ourselves and pause more and react less. So this will be the last week we talk on that as we transition into some more specific topical discussions like behavior, boundaries, different things of that nature. And so I hope this morning, as everyone's kind of still waking up, we've kind of come off the high of all the Easter candy. Everybody's got a cup of coffee in front of them. And interestingly enough, this actually marks the halfway point for our class. So as we finalize the last second half of the schedule here to ensure that we've got kind of the specific topics that we wanted to reach out to you guys about, as well as adjusting a little bit for some of the things where we had planned some more discussion type classes to be able to make those more friendly for the environment that we're operating in right now. So what is screen-free parenting? Barry introduced this 2 weeks ago, and the definition is really this idea of learning to pause so you can respond more, react less, and taking hold of your own emotional responses no matter how any other person chooses to behave. So again, learning to focus on yourself and take care of yourself for the world's benefit. So what does that mean in layman's terms? What this means, and this is a bit maybe a little more controversial kind of topic in the sense that we're trying to think of focusing on ourselves as a means of helping us to be better parents to raise our children, is that puts the responsibility on us as parents for our decisions and also puts the responsibility on our children for their decisions. So as you think through that, and my simplest terms, the way I can think about it is, as a parent, as I am trying to influence my children's behavior, I have the ability to do that before they make a decision, up until that point, and I have an ability to influence that decision after the fact, meaning I can provide all kinds of guidance and coaching up to a point where they have to make that decision, and then I can give feedback, consequences, and discipline, and all the other things that come along with a poor decision or guidance on feedback on a good decision. But the kids ultimately own that decision. I can't make that decision for them. and therefore I have to try and influence the realm around that. And in order to do that, I have to take care of understanding my own personal emotions, my own personal decision making to do that. And that's really what, as I simplify this down in my own mind, is that's what screen-free parenting is. How do I control my emotions? How do I control my plan to influence my children so that they make the right decision? I'm not responsible for that decision. I'm responsible for what happens beforehand and what happens afterhand as a parent. And that's a little bit different concept. Well, really where that comes back from is this idea of flight attendant wisdom. So those of you who have flown have probably either seen the little handout that comes in the back seat of an airplane or the flight attendants demonstrating with the mask. But really this idea of in a time of crisis, if something is going on, the flight attendants provide this guidance and training to us as parents. And it's kind of counterintuitive traditionally when we think about it. I want to first usually put an oxygen mask on my kid because I need to take care of my kid first. Put it on them. They're not capable of sometimes doing that, especially in time of crisis, is I need to put this mask on my children first and then put mine on my own. But the challenge there is if I am in a situation where I put the mask on my child first and then I start to lose oxygen, my judgment is impaired. I can't perform even the simplest tasks. In many cases, I may be the person grasping for air, and therefore I cannot help my family, my child, to do the things that they need to do. So the idea is putting the mask on ourselves first, controlling ourselves, so that then we can help our family and our children become successful adults. So parenting is, as we can start to unwrap this a little bit further, it has, good news and bad news to it. The good news is, the bad news is that parenting's hard, right? That decision in time of crisis or in an emotionally heated situation to take care of my own emotions first and instead of dealing with the child is hard. The decisions are made by our children on certain things that they have to do that are not in my control. And that's hard because we like to be control freaks to some extent. But nothing in this class is going to make that go away. Parenting is still going to be hard. There's still going to be tough times that we have to go through. The good thing about it, though, that comes with that, it is very rewarding. I can't speak to what it means to raise a full adult yet, but it is really rewarding even as you have younger kids to see their development, to see different things where they are excited to serve. They're excited to help someone else. They're excited about things that you've instilled values and different things in them. And that's really rewarding for us as parents. And the good thing is we have an ability to impact that. We can't eliminate all the bad, and we can't, fully probably succeed in making the perfect child into an adult, but we have the ability to influence that and impact it. And really what it comes down to and what we're going to focus a lot on today is this concept of relationships. And the interesting part about it is that it's a growth process. So as we think about what that means, it has a lot of different pieces to it. But it's important that we think about relationships. And this applies not only for raising children, but relationships with our spouses, relationships with people we work with, family members, or just the person we meet. A lot of these topics are applicable regardless of whether you're raising children right now or just a person that's involved with interaction with somebody or has a friendship or a relationship with somebody. The best part about this whole thing is we're never going to be the same as we were before we had kids as parents. I can tell you right now, I was a much better parent before I had kids. I was really good at critiquing different things. I had all the things laid out. And then all that kind of goes out the window as you first become a parent. And things really change. As you think about it, all of our free time is now at a different priority level than it used to be. Having the ability to go and do what I want to do without the considerations of 6 other people or 4 other people, depending on your size of your family. Sleep patterns definitely change as we think about the early times of bringing a newborn baby home from the hospital. Understanding that sleep pattern has no rhyme or reason to it, and you really realize the value of having about 3 hours of uninterrupted sleep and what impact that can mean. Of having an extra 10 minutes or not. And spending habits. Again, a lot of your financial spending gets redirected in places that previously you may not have wanted to direct them in. as we start thinking about food bills getting more expensive. I'm not able to go and do the things, spend my money to go to a Reds game and or buy season tickets or get a new pair of shoes or things of that nature. You have to think about those things in a different light. Travel schedules, the ability to just get up and go at the snap of a finger, the ability to travel and spend extended time away takes more planning. Even just going to the grocery store requires us as parents to make sure that other people have their shoes on, that they have coats on, that they are prepared to get in a vehicle. And those are tasks that we many times may feel like at times are very challenging, but we would not have thought that prior to having children. And so it's really interesting as we think through this of what kind of qualifications do I have to have as a parent or to be a parent? And in reality, there are very limited amount of qualifications. You can become a parent without having gone through driver's education or parent's education before having a child. And so in many cases, this is probably one of the largest parts of our lives as adults where we are as unqualified or feel as unqualified as we do in most anything that we come in contact with. And that's because we're really tasked as a parent of helping a needy or dependent child become a self-directed adult. And that comes with a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty. And in times of question and uncertainty, it's tough to maintain a stability and plan. And again, as part of that growth process, the important thing to think about when you think about relationships is they are really people-growing machines. And that's an interesting connection. Not necessarily just to people-growing machines and the fact that we're growing children to be adult people, but anybody that's involved in a relationship grows from that relationship. The interactions that happen between two people cause both to consider other viewpoints, causes us both to consider the ramifications of different decisions in a different way than they would have if it was just me making a decision by myself. And parents and children, when we think about that relationship, is we're in that together. You and me and the kid, and we're challenged to grow. And that's difficult because it challenges us to assess ourselves and really think about personal growth. That challenge is more difficult because of the close proximity of that relationship. In many cases, we are with these children for extended periods of our day. Some of us have the luxury of being able to go to work, and others, have the luxury of spending a lot of time with our children at home. And those both have different balances. And those close relationships of spending time together, whether it's hours in the car together, whether it's 30 minutes at the dinner table together, create more opportunities for interaction. And through that, there's going to be a lot of these growing pains. And what I talked about is that uncertainty as the growing pains happen creates anxiety. And that can be really challenging for both the parent and the child to just navigate that environment and that situation. The good thing about it, though, as parents, is we are in a different structure in that terms, in the fact that we set the parameters for that relationship and the child-parent relationship versus one where we are friends and on equal balance. We have the opportunity to control a lot of those different parameters, which is good because that gives us the opportunity to influence in the most effective way, but also there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. In Ephesians 5, verses 1 and 2, it says that imitate God, therefore, in everything that you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice to us, a pleasing aroma to God. And so here, we as people and parents and Christians in general are told that we are the children of God. And so this is an example that we've been given around what it looks like to show love. But also we're called here, and I use the translation here, the New Living Translation, because I love the first word here. It says imitate God. So it speaks to us to be imitators of God to our children, the same way that Christ was an example to us. And this is important for us because our decisions reveal our character and how we choose to operate, and our character needs to be focused on Christ. And that is kind of the basic mindset that we need to take when we think about our emotions and our relationships as a starter for our children. And it's, as we think about that relationship, it is, again, the same way there's good and bad. There's no pain, no gain. It's not going to be an easy, straight shot road that I follow these checklists and my child is going to grow into this amazing adult. It takes time. And the important thing about it is an attitude decision. It's a choice that we have as parents, the same way it's a choice that our children have to whether they're going to follow the guidance that we've set aside or the rules and boundaries and parameters that we've set aside. And the important thing to think about is that we have to have this willingness to endure discomfort. It is, again, not going to be easy, but without the pain, there is no gain. And it's really important to think about the fact that it requires us to mature as adults. Many of us like to think that we are mature, but it's interesting how when we get into disagreement with our children that we tend to turn into children ourselves. And that can be create additional challenges, right, in that interaction. But it creates this renewed focus on ourselves. We have to think about ourselves as parents of how do we can take care of ourselves to be the best parents that we can be. The last part about this, though, is to see that challenge as an opportunity. And what that means is that difficult times have meaning. So even as we go through times where there is a lot of anxiety, a lot of chaos, a lot of animosity or concern, it's a learning opportunity, not only for us, but for the child. And so it's really important to see that challenge as an opportunity for us to grow and to leverage that as part of our journey and plan that we have to reinforce that. Probably the number one theme and focus of the Scream Free Parenting book is this concept of reactivity and how do I react to situations. I'm a little bit of a science geek, and so as one of the things is OSHA requires is hazardous communication, and there's different ways that you can do that. And a lot of different chemicals and things have different ways that they react and respond that are important for us to know as we interact with them. As you can see, fire hazard. The higher the number there, the more hazardous that it has for a fire. The health hazard, the blue one there, speaks to things that may have other health concerns to it, or the white one at the bottom, specific hazards that we need to be aware of as we interact with it. But I want to focus on the yellow one. The yellow one is actually called reactivity, if you can see that on the left-hand side here. And there are different levels of reactivity. And I love the way that they characterize these. 0 is stable, right? If there's a 0 there, you don't have to worry about being reactive with other things. It's pretty easy to deal with. Number 1, though, is, you got to be careful because it starts to get unstable if it gets heated. And so I'm starting to make some parallels and connections as we think about our emotions here, right? Number 2 is you got to be careful because there could be a very violent chemical change. Someone could go from calm to violent very quickly, related to that chemical change. And number 3 is there is a opportunity that shock or heat may detonate. And again, as we think about different situations, there may be a lot of shock and awe in different situations we have and interactions that we have with our kids that may cause us to detonate. And so number 4 is this idea of detonation. So the question then that I challenge you guys to think about, and not just our lives as parents, but also personal lives, interaction with other people, are how often are we at 0? How often are we at that stability level that says, man, I'm stable, doesn't matter what comes my way, I'm not gonna react and respond in a manner that's gonna cause me to detonate. Maybe our heads start to swell when we get to level 2, which means that there's this violent chemical change that's happening, and I may not, react, but it's building up inside of me, and I can feel the emotion, and it's something that if it keeps going may cause me to have an eruption of emotion. And I love, again, that they define number 4 as detonate, because we can think about times where we just want to go ballistic as parents because of something that's gone on, the way that our children act in a grocery store, or the fact they're hitting each other, or a poor decision that was made. There's a lot of disappointment and things that come with that. And a lot of that, again, can be very sensitive to things that are going on in our environment. So when we think about when do we have these moments that cause us to go off of the 0 level to something higher than that, it's important for us to reflect on what those are. There's a lot of stress and tension right now, obviously with, COVID going on and, uncertainties in the world that can cause us to go up in the levels of reactivity much quicker than maybe we would in a normal time. Sensitivity around, family situations or other things that are going on in our lives. We just need to be aware of that. And this is a part of that growing up and mature process that we're called to do as parents and as adults is to be the mature person, to be able to have that self-reflection and understand that we may be more susceptible and be more sensitive to the fact that things may cause us to respond more aggressively than we normally would. So the other thing I was challenged on this is, as we think about different times, is can you recall a time as a parent or as a person in general where flipping out actually helped the situation? I can think of multiple times in my parenting life where flipping out may have actually made the situation worse, with the rare exception of maybe a safety time where a child runs out in the street and a car is coming or chasing a ball in the street to react in a manner that is causing a heightened sense of responsiveness from our children. But usually the heightened response from ourselves makes the situation worse, and a lot of times may actually reinforce the negative responses that we're trying to prevent our children from having themselves. So I challenge you to think through that. Is there really any benefit from a parenting perspective to go to an emotional level of 3 or 4 or maybe even 2 at a consistent time? And so this is where we're really going to spend a little bit of time here, because James calls us in chapter 1, verses 19 and 20 to really take this to heart. And he says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." And again, it's trying to slow our ramping up from 0 to 4. The longer we can do that, the more likely we are going to return back to 0. And so this concept of parenting in screen-free parenting actually aligns very heavily back to this concept and wisdom from James. What we're trying to do, though, is produce that righteousness in us that James talks about, righteousness that God desires, and model that example for our kids so that they take on a similar approach, so they take on a similar character to develop righteousness in their own lives, that God desires. So the other side of this is, Jesus is a very clear example of time of calm and time of chaos or of tense times. John 8, verses 3 through 8 says, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, 'Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery, and the law of Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. Now, what do you say?' And they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger. And when they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, 'Let any of you who is without sin be the first one to throw a stone at her.' And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground." So imagine this situation. They bring this woman. There's a crowd with her. She's committed adultery, which is, again, per the law, very clearly a breaking of the law. There's this tension around trying to potentially trap Jesus into something they can accuse him for and charge him with a crime down the road. But how does Jesus respond? First thing he does, he doesn't say anything to the group. Bends down and starts writing in the ground with his finger. And I can imagine the response being very odd, kind of questioning, what is this guy doing? What's going on here? He comes up very calmly and says, has a very straight response, which is, if anyone's got, sin, cast the first stone. Has no sin, cast the first stone. And then goes right back down and starts writing in the ground again. Now, no idea what he's writing there, but a really interesting approach to a very tense situation, a situation of potential ramifications down the road, but he stays calm. He responds in calm. And in doing so, later on, the crowd disperses because they realize in the situation that Jesus was right. And so it's a really interesting way to bring the tension level down, just in his manner of how he responded to what is a very tense input coming from a group of people. So how do we think about this, right? Taking Jesus as an example, he was what we would call, as Barry mentioned in the previous class, a cool parent. Cool in the terms of calm, not cool in the terms of the one that does all the things that children ask them to do and does these things that other parents would not allow them to do, but one that anticipates the situation and recognizes it. And so how do we think about that as parents? We know as parents after some period of time that there are going to be certain situations that probably have more tension and anxiety. Sometimes that's bedtime, of getting our children calmed down enough to get into bed and brushing teeth and doing all the things that we had laid out that are important routine items, whether it's sitting at the table, eating dinner, having to eat those peas or lima beans, or it's doing homework, it's going somewhere that they want to do, it's turning off the TV, all these different things. Many times we can anticipate those situations going to be tense. I need to get the children in the car so I can get them to school so I can make it to work on time. And every day something's going to happen. So it's not new every day. Those are going to be the opportunities. So it's recognizing that anxiety is going to be there and taking steps to preempt that. And pausing is really the first thing there, to understand it, take a pause, and not react. And that's really an important thing to do as part of that growing up, as we talked about, is recognizing this is going to be a tense situation. I need to respond to it, but I also have the opportunity to prepare for that response. The second thing here is to stay in the moment, right? Many times our emotions can go from 0 to 4, and we're not thinking straight. The things that were going on, I either need to withdraw from a situation and control my emotions, or I'm going to respond in a different way. But the important thing is we have to stay in that moment, because the moment is happening there whether or not we want it to or not. And really being engaged in doing that requires us to be calm. So the third part is really letting the consequences do the yelling. So as we think about how do I control that, is number one, not allowing myself to get to the level 4 of instability, but being able to stay calm in the moment. Use the opportunity as part of the plan we've laid out, which is I'm planning to respond to my children in this way. There are going to be boundaries and there's going to be discipline and consequences, and allowing those consequences to do the yelling. Now, the one caveat there is that we've had to communicate it to some extent, probably that there's some rule or boundary there or some consequence. Otherwise, this is a learning opportunity, and it's an opportunity to really leverage a conversation with your child of, this is the reason why this is not important. There's not going to be consequences now, but if this happens again in the future, laying those consequences out. And so Barry and I will get into, in the coming weeks, this concepts of really digging into discipline and boundaries and how they are key as an important part of that entire plan to really do the important thing here. But you don't need to yell. You don't need to raise your voice to have an impact. The consequences themselves should have the impact. You are just the person enforcing those consequences, and enforcing does not necessarily mean you have to yell. It doesn't mean you have to be mean. It doesn't mean you have to be rude. It has to mean you have to be staunch and stick to your guns for the most part. But don't miss the chance. Don't miss the opportunities here because of the anxiety. Anticipate it. Stay in the moment. Stay calm, and then let the consequences do the talking. Sounds really simple to do now. That's why it's important to talk through it now, because you have to understand those situations are going to come and be prepared for how you're going to respond to those situations. I love this quote. My wife used to use this all the time when she was working with kids and counseling in the schools, because it's an important thing for our children to understand, and it's an important thing for us to understand as adults even. This is from Charles Swindoll, and this is a part of a larger quote, but it says, "We have the choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for the day. Life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it. Our attitude is everything." And I think that is even more important as we are parents, right? These situations are coming at us, which we've talked about earlier in this class, in this session right now, that we are unprepared. We're unqualified. We are just a person just like somebody else. But how we respond to the fact that we're parents, what kind of preparation am I going to put into place? What type of things am I going to do to anticipate situations that are going to come up? And understand that how we respond to those situations is the majority of the solution. we can't control that 10% in many cases. In some cases we can, but in this case, it's how we respond. Attitude is huge, especially in times of tense emotion, situations of anxiety. And our kids see this. Our kids, if we haven't mentioned it enough, are sponges. I've mentioned that probably every time because I continue to be reminded of it when I see my kids and the things that they do and the way they respond and the way they act, is that they mimic us. So how we respond in situations of tension, the calm and composure that we provide is going to allow them to contain and control their emotions in a similar manner, partly because they have the same DNA structure we do, but also because they've been witness to an example that we've provided to them, which should be consistent with imitating the example that Christ and God has given to us. So all these things play together, and so I really love this quote for that reason as a parent, is that our attitude is a huge, huge, huge part of the parenting puzzle. So it's important as we think through what it means is, again, we're going to have many opportunities to put this into practice. I can tell you many. And I think the times now that we are even closer proximity with the quarantine and the things that are going on with COVID give us plenty of opportunity to test this out, to try some things out, but you got to be intentional about it. Again, always working on your game. And it's this concept of not practice makes perfect, because again, we're not really ever going to be perfect, but the idea that it's this continuum. And I thought it was a really interesting observation that doctors and psychiatrists don't call themselves a perfect, they call themselves a practice. You go to a doctor's practice or a psychiatrist's practice because they are always learning. There's this learning curve that's always going on. It's how a different mindset and thought approach to things is that they're always in practice. They've never perfected their trade. They've never perfected ways of working. And so it's really important to think about that as parents, is that it's not something that we can get perfect at, but it helps ingrain that in ourselves. The 21-90 rule is this concept that a lot of people have talked about, which is in order for something to be a habit or become ingrained in us as a pattern, you need to do it for 21 days straight. And then after doing that, if you are able to sustain that for another 90 days, then it is ingrained to you as a permanent pattern. So I question whether or not we will have 21 days straight of opportunities to put this idea of calm into practice, but I can almost guarantee you may have 21 in a single day. So it's an opportunity for us to really think about it. We cannot eliminate all those mistakes. Can't get to that idea of perfect. So it's important for us to listen to those core principles. Again, the things we've talked about, laid out, from James: quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Those are the kind of things that are core in our abilities as a parent to respond to our children in a loving way and respond to our children in a manner that's going to allow both us and them to grow and develop. We cannot ignore the different things that are going on or the anxiety. We can't control that either. However, we can get in front of some of that. So again, it's this mindset of growth, of pausing and staying calm and anticipating different things. Again, developing that pattern. So as we kind of wrap up the latter parts here, things to consider. This is really important, I think, is calm does not mean walk on eggshells. I think that would very much undermine the development and progress that we were making as parents to help our children become self-sustaining adults. Is that if we walk on eggshells, it undermines, again, our authority and the role as a parent to be able to help reinforce the characteristics and traits and behaviors that we want our children to do. Kids need to know that we are strong enough to confront them. There are a lot of us that do not like confrontation. However, it's pretty clear as a parent that we're going to have to do that. They want us to be strong enough, again, to be that strong overseer, to be the adult in the relationship. And they want us to be mature enough to withstand their tantrums. Some of that is a test, right? But it also gives them a feeling of safety, to know that somebody else is watching out for them, that somebody else is in control. The same reason that we get the peace that surpasses all understanding from God. It's a demonstration of love. It's part of that whole relationship we talked about a few weeks ago of the structure, the safety, the love that children feel through that parent-child relationship. And I hate to say it, but conflict is necessary. It's one of those things that children need to understand as part of life. It's part of relationships, is that there is going to be conflict, disagreements, discussions, whatever you want to call them in your household, is that's just the nature of life. People are going to have differing opinions, and they need to be able to understand how to handle those situations in a manner that is productive. And they are going to get that model from us. So it's a bit of this idea of understanding that our children need to be clear that there's a bit of this reaping. You're gonna reap what you sow. If I continue to do these things, there are consequences that come with it, and that is part of life. And so, as we think about this, we're just really trying to equip our children to be able to handle conflict in a healthy manner. And again, we're playing the long game here, not the short. And that's important to remember, because many times we may want to just not have to deal with the situation. I've had a long day. I don't want to argue with my child about eating their peas. I'm just going to let them go ahead and eat the snack after dinner, rather than reinforcing something there. And we have to think about the long game. We're thinking about trying to develop our children to be adults and deal with consequences, to deal with situations where there's going to be tension and anxiety. And they're going to experience that in life. So if we don't prepare them as parents now, when we have the opportunity to, then we're setting them up to have some challenges down the road. So again, equipping our children is extremely important. So wrapping up here to summarize it in kind of three buckets for you. First is we've got to give up the idea that we are in control of our children's actions. We have to manage our emotions so that they learn to control their behavior. Again, I can influence up to the point of their decision, and I can have some influence after their decisions, but I cannot control their decisions. So I, therefore, have to calm down. I have to control my emotions. I've got to let go of others' emotions. My child screaming on the floor, stomping their feet because they want the candy bar at the grocery store or the toy at Target, is that I have to control my emotions and then take steps to obviously help them understand the impact of their behaviors. But I do so in a calm manner. In order to do that, though, I have to grow up. I have to raise to that higher level of maturity. I have to be the adult in the situation. And in doing so, I also have to give them the opportunity to mature, meet me at the same level. They don't need to be at the adult, but they need to meet me at a mature level to be able to have a conversation, to talk through it. And then I have to also, as an adult, understand how am I feeling in this moment. Besides being frustrated or embarrassed or all those different things that come along with the public aspect of it, but the hurt or the betrayal or the fear that I have because of what's going on, I have to recognize that as an adult. It's this concept of I statements, again, that being able to recognize what I'm feeling and why am having this response the way I am, to be able to address that and acknowledge that and even communicate that to our children. And in actuality, again, the last step, as I talked about, this confrontation, the ability to confront our children, to reinforce the rules and behaviors and boundaries that we've put in place, actually helps us to grow closer. We have to confront our children, but it's important that we understand, again, why they are responding in the way they are. In the same manner I'm understanding why I'm responding in the way, I need to understand, is there some additional feeling or issue or concern that my children are having that they are responding in the way that they are. Understanding I may not be able to change that behavior in the moment, but I need to be able to represent myself as the adult, I statements, whatever that is, understand what the child is having, do the confrontation, and then recognize that those kind of conversations and the ultimate results of the confrontation, the consequences that come with that, should, in a lot of cases, help us grow closer as a parent and a child. So really important to think about that, right? Again, my ability to stay calm allows me to be in the moment, to grow up, to understand my own emotions, and then ultimately grow closer through the interaction and confrontation. Confrontation has negative connotation, but to interaction and the consequences and the learning opportunity, teaching moment that comes from that interaction. So really important to think about that. Again, you can apply that in a lot of different situations. You can do that with relationships you have at work, family relationships, friend relationships, or relationships in general. But it is very important as we think about the parent-child relationship as part of parenting. So the last thing I'll leave you with here is, again, one more thing from Scripture, right? Psalms 25, 4 through 5 says, "Show me your ways, Lord, and teach me your paths. Guide me in your truths and teach me, for you are God, my Savior, and my hope is in you all day long." So again, focusing on ourselves here, right? Understanding that we still need to be taught. We need to continue to grow and mature as a person, as an adult, and ultimately as a parent. Focusing on ourselves and growing ourselves, keeping our stability at zero, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, is going to allow us to then help focus on our parenting. Putting our hope in God and not in ourselves is really going to allow us to be strengthened as a person and ultimately as a better parent, using God's example as we try and imitate Him. So I love that as a wrap up. As we think about, again, the second half of this class, Barry and I are going to be spending some time now as we transition off of screen-free parenting into things around such as discipline, behavior, different techniques around different age groups. We're going to try and get into more some of those tactical or situational opportunities to really think on how we can continue to develop skills and techniques that will help us as parents. But it's very important that we understand the way that we've set up this class structure up to this point is to ensure we understood the end in mind, what we're trying to do, which is raise responsible Christian adults that are doing the work of the Lord. But in order to do that, we have to have our foundation in place, is how we're going to parent, what that looks like, keeping our emotions in check so that we can then execute a plan that we've put together under our plan and guidance with God and our parenting partner to impact our children, and do that through a variety of different ways. So I hope you take a lot from this. I appreciate your time. And if you stay with us next week, we'll be getting into more detail about it with Barry as he comes in, and we'll be teaching next week. Just a reminder, this live stream, this specific stream will be ending here shortly. We'll be posting a link to switch over to the actual worship service through our website and through YouTube and Facebook. So appreciate it. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. Enjoy the weather and enjoy the time together. Thank you. Appreciate it.